Alright guys, so we're going to be learning a little bit about the basics of oil painting and how to create and start an oil painting. It's going to be a little bit different than acrylic painting, but a lot of the same things I'm going to talk about are going to still apply, like blocking in large areas of color so you get the color relativity down, starting with either darks or mid values. You know, I typically am an oil painter, so a lot of the things I was teaching you in acrylic paint was kind of still the same starting methods that I use for oil painting. So the main difference between acrylic paint and oil paint is the drying time. So acrylic paint is a water-based medium and oil paint is an oil-based medium. And that oil actually slows the drying time of the paint by a lot. So oil paint can actually dry anywhere by itself without any medium in it. Anywhere, I would say, between a few days to a month, depending on how much oil is in the paint and like how big of a glob of paint you have. I've had paint I've just waited to dry for like a month and it didn't dry at all. But it also depends on kind of like your environment and the weather you're in. If you're in kind of more humid weather, it's going to dry a little bit faster. If you're in like a more moist, cooler climate, it might take a little bit longer to dry. I've painted in basements that just hold moisture where my paintings stay wet forever. And I've also painted in, extremely dry environments, like in California where it just dries, somewhat fast, not terribly fast, not like acrylic paints. It's still a lot slower of a drying time than acrylics. I'm going to be doing a little 9x12 landscape painting. What I'm doing is a process called an Alla prima painting, and an Alla prima painting is a wet on wet painting. So what that means is the paint that I'm going to be using, it's going to be wet the whole way through. So I'm never going to be working on top of a dry surface of paint. Maybe I might, after I do this demo, if I have a little bit of time to kind of like finish it up, I might wait till the whole thing dries, and then I might do like really final, like subtle details and add a little bit more light into the painting at the very end. But because this is just a little demo of how to use oil paint for this lesson, it's going to be a one session painting for the most part, and it's going to be completely wet on wet, no drying time. I'll probably do it within a few hours, maybe an hour, depends on how quick I'm going to do it. And I do also have this other painting that I kind of started for you guys. It's a little bit slower of a process. It requires a little bit more drying time. Right now it's dry, so I can, some areas are dry. I just got, I don't know, that white's still wet in there. This one requires me to tape off a lot of spaces to get like straight edges, and it also just requires a lot of the paint surfaces to be dry. So I was trying to get that one done for you, but with the drying time that I needed, it wasn't possible. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to set up your palette and the different mediums that you can use within your palette. So let me grab my phone here. Okay, everybody. So this is my palette. I work on a glass palette. You guys have seen it in the past in my oil paint or my acrylic painting demos when I used it. It has those two giant cracks in the middle. Typically, you would want to keep your palettes a little bit cleaner than what I have it, because this paint here will actually lift off the palette when I'm mixing color, and it will mix into the color that I'm using. Even though it's fairly dry on my palette, eventually it will mix up into the color that I'm using and the color that I'm mixing. So ideally, you do not want that to happen, like at all. But it's hard for me to clean around these cracked areas, and I'll show you as we move along the process, but you want to use a scraper to scrape away paint on your palette. Here, do a little area over here. Right? And it's easier to do this whenever it is wet and not dried on your palette. So I would get in the habit of always cleaning your palette at the end of your painting sessions. And then I also have my paint set up on the edge of my palette. All right, and I have all my dirty paints on everything too. And you're going to know how you prefer to have your palette set up, but I like to have my white in one location, my yellows in one location. So I have my lemon yellow, which is my cool yellow, my cad yellow, which is my warm yellow. I usually use 3 reds. Sometimes I'll use all 3 of these reds, other times I'll just use one. So I have my cad red, which is a warmer, my alizarin crimson, which is cool, and then I have this random red. I don't really know what it is, but it's actually my favorite red to use. It was sent to me as a sample, and they never titled the name. Then I have my blues. So I have my warm blue, which is phthalo blue, and my cool, in my cool blue, ultramarine blue. And then I have my greens, and I normally don't really use a lot of greens. I mix a lot of my own greens. So I have my Viridian green right now. I know it's kind of hard to see right now because I tube my own paints. I buy and tube my own paints. So like they're kind of like the labels are getting washed off. But I also try, when I at least first start, I try to keep my paints together too. So again, same way that I have my my palette set up, I do the same thing with my paints. Hold on, let me get this so I'm not facing the mic in the back. So I have my titanium white, and then so I have 2 titanium whites. These are all my greens right here, 4 greens. I have my 2 yellows. Then I have my like orangey browns, which is like Baroque red. I actually have this pirate orange, which is really bright. I only use that in special occasions. Burnt sienna, my random red, quinacridone magenta, cad red, and then my 2 blues. And then here's some of my miscellaneous tubes that I don't use that often, but every now and again I use these little tubes. These 2 are just ultramarine blue, so I don't know. They're kind of repetitive there. You can see that some of my paint tubes do not have lids on them. This is from my lids falling off and me losing them, and then I don't replace them. So what ends up happening is, because oil paint doesn't dry, it will just kind of like matte over the top. So it will make a little like skin over the top, and then the rest of your oil paint in the inside will stay wet. Ideally, I wouldn't do this. Keep your lids on, because eventually it will kind of like spread down and dry over time faster than what it would with a lid on. But it does skin over the top, and then you can just scrape off that skin and then squeeze out some paint on your canvas if you happen to lose a lid. All right. So oil paint, it spreads, right? If it gets on you, it's going to get everywhere. If you step in it, it's going to be all throughout your house. So try and stay clean. I wear gloves whenever I paint. These are my painting mediums that I use. I use liquid. This is a dry medium. It dries kind of like semi-matte, semi-gloss, or semi-gloss. So it'll be a little bit glossy, but it dries pretty fast. This can dry within, I'd say, like an hour or 2, this liquid. I like to use that a lot. I have this blending and glazing medium. I'm not really sure what the mixture in this is. It's probably something that you could just make by buying your own, like, it's like a mixture with mineral spirits and some other things in there. But I like this. I don't use it too often. It's something I used to use in undergrad all the time. Cold wax medium. Again, I don't use this that often, but this actually will thicken the paint. These other 2 will thin the paint down. So this will thicken the paint up. It will give it like a frosted texture. So if you want to do a impasto type of painting, where that an impasto painting is where you're using your palette knife or even a paintbrush, and you're using really thick paint on your painting. So if you want to use impasto and not use up all your paint, cold wax medium is a good resource to use, and it also dries matte. Oh, I have 2 of these blending and glazing stuff. This is Neoglip. I haven't used this in a while. I think this is semi-gloss, and it dries pretty fast, thins the paint down. And then there's Galkid, Galkid normally dries really glossy. So this is semi-gloss. This is extremely glossy. Sometimes if you like to play with the ending appearance of the painting, you can like place really glossy textures with Galkid, and then you can use maybe like cold wax medium to have very matte textures, or I don't know if texture is the right word, surfaces. Okay, and then we have mineral spirits, which comes in a can like this. I would get odorless mineral spirits. You can buy something fancy from the paint store, but you can also get this for a lot cheaper at Walmart. It's a lot larger, gives you a lot more mineral spirits. Make sure you get odorless, or else you'll get a headache. And I keep my odorless mineral spirits, oh my goodness, in a coffee container. You want to make sure it has a lid on it, and I just keep it in there. You can see all my gross, dirty sediment, so that's my old paint that settles on the bottom. Eventually that will kick up into the mineral spirits, so it is better to kind of clean that out from time to time. but I don't have really like an area to dump that, so I kind of just let it settle on the bottom, and sometimes I switch the jars that I use. Make sure you have a lid on it at all times. It is flammable, so be careful with it, and it will give you a headache. So you want to paint in an area that kind of has like good ventilation. Maybe paint with your windows open. Just be aware of that. So this will dry pretty fast, the mineral spirits, and it really thins on the paint and it dries really matte. Something else to think about is the concept of fat over lean. So what that means is fat is whenever a medium or the oil paint has more actual physical oil in the paint, and lean means it has less oil. So something like mineral spirits is lean. It doesn't have any oil in it. And you want to paint fat over lean. So what you want to do with your painting is you want to start your painting out with your leaner mediums added to your oil paint. So I normally start out with mineral spirits, and I kind of like thin my paint down, block in some areas with that lean mineral spirits, and then add in more of these fatter substances as I move forward. What you can do it the opposite way, but what ends up happening is over time that will end up giving you cracks in your painting. So if you paint lean over fat, it will end up cracking your painting over time. So if you're glazing in the end with mineral spirits or doing washes with mineral spirits, after you already added a bunch of oil into paint, like say you used walnut oil, you added a bunch of walnut oil into your paint, and you did lean after, it's going to crack in the end. I use these thick paper towels whenever I'm using these mediums. I either just put them straight on my palette, or sometimes I put them in a jar and I use them in a jar. So that is up to you. Let me see what else. I have my few things of paintbrushes that I have. I got more paintbrushes up there. And I probably have some more hidden in other locations. Excuse my dirty studio. Got all my gloves. Something else you're going to want to think about is having a place to store your dirty rags, whether that be a Walmart bag. They are flammable, so once you get that mineral spirits on it, it can randomly ignite. So I have this flammable jar, or I don't know, container, and I keep all my rags in here. I know that you guys can't all have this, but if you have something like this, like some kind of canister that you can put and store your rags in, you want to get in the habit of doing that, because the rags can spontaneously combust. Okay. That being said, I have painted without this for a very, very long time. It hasn't happened to me, but it has happened to my undergrad school in the printmaking studio. Alright guys, so I accidentally was explaining how to mix painting, and somehow my camera turned off, so I don't know if I accidentally turned it off whenever I was trying to get closer, and when I was talking about the tinting strength. So again, I'm not sure where I cut off my instructions, but the tinting strength of my quinacridone magenta is a lot stronger than my tinting strength of my Viridian green. I knew that, and I still, if you look close, you can see the tinting strength of how the magenta kind of took over and made a purplish black. And in this area, it's more of a greenish black. If you kind of go through, you can see the green a little bit better. This one's a little bit more neutralized of a black than this one. This one, you can see the magenta a lot more. So there's a lot of differences in actual blacks that you mix. And I didn't get to show you. I also got cut off when I was showing you how to mix. Basically, what you want to do is you want to scrape up the paint, turn your palette knife over, push it down, scrape it up, push it down, scrape it up. Sometimes I make these little, circular things. And you want to do that until you don't see any paint left. Otherwise, say I had a little bit of just straight crimson in there, then whenever I apply it to my canvas, that crimson is going to saturate everything, and it's going to because it's not mixed on my palette, I'm going to have to figure out how to mix it on my canvas. Okay, so I just have these two blacks mixed so far. I am going to mix the rest of a few more colors that I'm just going to block in really quick. So they're going to be some kind of like mid-value greens. And then we will get to painting. So let me put this back up here. To move some of these colors over, scrape off my palette because I run out of room fast. So I try to keep my palette a little organized, but you'll see as time goes on that doesn't stay like that. I make a mess really quick. I mean, you guys have seen me paint before in our demos, so you know how messy I am. So all of that is gonna infect any other color that I have, cause it's wet, you know. So I normally take a little bit of mineral spirits. Wipe those areas up. You know, I'm not always so finicky, but sometimes I am. Other times I'm not. But you do want your colors to not contaminate one another, all right? It's important. It's going to frustrate you if you contaminate them. It's not like acrylic paint, so like if a color is contaminated and it's really wet, you have to wait till it dries until you can fix it, and that can take a really long time. Okay guys, so I am painting on what is called Arches oil painting paper. So if you've ever worked on Arches paper before, it has the same general like textured Arches feel, and it's specifically made for oil painting, so it doesn't need primed with gesso or anything like that, and it absorbs the paint. So it's a little bit different than working on the canvas or even the canvas paper that you guys have been working on. So when I'm working on canvas, you know, this is a lot, I keep forgetting it's wet. The canvas is gessoed and it has a few layers of gesso on it. So I can actually wipe paint away a lot easier on this. Basically back right down to the smooth surface of the gesso, where this kind of absorbs it. I can still kind of pick up some paint. And eventually once it absorbs so much paint, then like the paint gets a little bit more slippery on top of the surface because it stops absorbing after a certain period of time. But it's just another surface to work on. You can oil paint on paper, but you have to gesso it. You can oil paint on a lot of surfaces, but you have to gesso it first, because what happens is the oil paint will eat through the whatever it's sitting on top. Also, you can do an underpainting of an acrylic painting and then add oil over top of it, but you cannot put acrylic paint over oil paint, all right? Because the oil paint will eat through the acrylic paint, all right? So you just gotta be aware of kind of like how it's a little bit corrosive to certain materials, and over time it will just kind of like make the materials on top like fall apart, right? Okay, so I'm gonna zoom in and let's get painting. All right, so I'm just dipping my paintbrush into my mineral spirits, and I'm just gonna kind of loosely map in my little drawing here. And it's not gonna be, it's a landscape, and I'm not really a landscape painter, but what I do like about landscapes is that they're like a lot more just freeing. They're a little bit more freeing in terms of the drawing of them. You know, you can keep it really loose, which I really like. Do them really fast. You can make them as tight or detailed as you want. It's really up to you. So I'm just gonna block in all my darks first. So the reason I block in my darks before my lights, and I'll actually show you, is because you can it's a lot easier. Let me not do something so gessoed down, or not gessoed down, terps down. If I ever say turpentine, I mean mineral spirits, okay? So if I start with a dark, it's a lot easier for me to add a light on top of it, right? Oh, whoops, sorry. I don't know if that was on the camera. So if I add a dark, it's a lot easier for me to paint a light on top of it. But if I put in a white, and I'm just using straight white paint right now for the point. Can you even see that? There's white right there. If I put in a white and then I go to add in a dark, let me switch my paintbrushes up. I can't really ever get it to that black. Like, I have to go pretty thick. And it also like turned it like purple. See, it's showing the tinting strength of the color that I used, and it turned it more like purple. If I wanted to take that black, what I would have to do is take a really thick, see how thick that glob of paint is? Set it on top and not touch it. Because if I blend it out, it's just going to still turn like into a gray color. Whereas I can always take that white, I can still blend that white if I wanted to down into a gray, but I can always go lighter. So you always want to start with dark and mid values and then add the lights in at the end, because otherwise if I want to put any blacks in this area, it's just going to be a lot harder to deal with. All right? So always work from darks or mid values to lights in oil painting. All right, let's get to painting again. I'm just using mineral spirits at this point, and you notice how I left the white of the paper. You could very easily have tinted this paper. I think it is a good method to start with, especially on the paper. It is better to do that because you can actually, like, if I wipe it away, it will leave that tinted ground, but it won't like mix into my other paints too much. So I would tint the paper and then I would wipe a bunch of it away, like actually like, you know, wipe off as much as you can. That way that tint doesn't mix into all your other colors. Otherwise, I would tint the paper or the canvas and kind of wait for it to dry a little bit. Just blocking in my large areas of color. These kind of dark greens, but I'm going to kind of mix kind of my mid-value green with my dark green because it's not as dark as those blacks up there. The reason I kind of like to block in is instead of just seeing the shape through contour line, I can actually see the shape, you know, because I have a mass form and a mass color at that point. So I can see a lot more of the shape and I don't have to, you know, rely so heavily on the contour line. And that's pretty dark. It's not actually that dark on my image, I don't think, but I'd rather start out dark than too light. So in this method, I am kind of keeping it really watered down. Instead of, you know, kind of blocking, like doing an overtone over my whole white painting, I'm still kind of doing an overtone, but I'm just blocking in all the areas with a general basic color first, and I'm not really focusing too heavily on anything else going on. Alright, so that's all my darks and midtones, well, really all my dark values in this painting. There are, up here, it's kind of a mid value, and then I have like a sunlight down here. So I got all my darks and my my extreme mid values blocked in. So now I'm gonna mix a little bit lighter of a blue. Honestly, that's kind of interesting looking, like from the camera when I look at it. I'm really like tedious and nitpicky. I kind of like all this like weird mark making. I'll probably go through and like ruin it because I want to get like details and stuff in there, because it's like sometimes one of my flaws is I really enjoy painting details. Okay, so now we can go in and start bringing in some of the like shape of the tree, some of the tree branches, bring in some of the oranges into this tree. We can bring in some of the lights down here. And I have lights up here, so I am going to actually bring in some areas of light down here. And I am painting thicker now. I could blend everything together, be really precious, but this is wet on wet, so I could have taken yellow, just straight, well, I'll show you guys. I can take just straight yellow, and I'll come down here with it. Put a little on there, and then kind of blend it together and keep it a little bit more thinned out on my picture. But I kind of mixed like this more intense green. I didn't mix it too thoroughly. You can see that glob of yellow in the middle. And I'm just bringing it into this painting now, and I'm making it thicker. Because I don't know, I always have texture in my landscape, so I guess I'm just going to continue on with that. If you want to do looser painting, hold your paintbrush back here and kind of paint more with your arm. If you hold it up here, you can see me, I switch back and forth. You're painting more with your wrist, have a little bit more control over it. And sometimes I mix on my palette, sometimes I mix large areas of color with my palette knife, then I mix like a bunch of different areas together on my palette, and sometimes I just mix on my painting. So you'll find out kind of what methods work for you and when you want to use them. So here is the aftermath of my palette and my workspace. Here is the painting so far. Very, very unfinished still. Well, not very unfinished, but unfinished. Need some cleaning up. I'm going to look at it for a while, let it be really loose how it is. See how I feel. Add a bunch. There's a lot more has to happen down here in terms of like value differences. My wall. Disaster, right? I don't know if that was probably already there though. But notice my palette, how I kept all the lights and the oranges and yellows on this side, then it kind of shifts to like my light blues, and then shifts over to my darker colors and my greens. Right, so I kind of still, like, it's a mess, but it's still a little organized, and I cleaned it a few times in between. So I think that's all I have for myself now. I'm going to show you really quick how to clean a paintbrush. And I think that's going to be it for at least this video. I might make another video ending it. But when I clean my brushes, whoops, I use my mineral spirits. Dip my brush in the water, wipe it on the rag, dip it in the water, wipe it on the rag. You can like kind of use the edge of your can to kind of wipe it off a little bit. I used to do it like that. It does get a lot of the paint off. See how it started really orange and now it's a lot clearer. Now I'm going to just set this one on the side here. But it does also wear your brushes down over time. The more aggressive you clean them, it will like fray your brushes. I'll see if I have one of my old brushes that basically completely change shapes. So you do this in the mineral spirits first, and then after you clean your brushes in mineral spirits, you go to the sink and clean them with soap and water, because the soap gets the oil out of the brushes and also gets a lot more paint out than what you get with the mineral spirits. I use Dawn dish soap when I clean, because it really is the best the best dish soap. You know, they have those little commercials of them getting oil off ducks and stuff. Yeah, there's no joke with that. It's just really good soap. I always use a clean rag with this if I can, just so I know how dirty my brushes are still. And I kind of go all around the rag, finding clean areas to retest. You will splatter the mineral spirits everywhere, so just be wary of that for your surroundings. Just trying to get as much paint out as possible, and also as much mineral spirits off my brush as possible on the rag before you take anything near a sink. Because technically you should be washing your brushes in a designated sink area. Alright, looks okay. This is all thinned out, like really thin on my canvas, so eventually it will dry. So I'm actually just going to, I'm going to take the palette knife I just had. I'm going to mix it into basically a big pile of gray. Take my blade, if I can find it. You can buy these blades at Walmart, at a hardware store. I would just leave it probably at this level, take a rag and wipe it down. I normally put some of my mineral spirits, the clean stuff, on it, and then wipe it down with a rag. And you take all your rags, put them in a safe place so they don't get too much oxygen, so they don't accidentally spontaneously combust. Cover your turpentine or mineral spirits. Don't use turpentine, just mineral spirits. Go to your sink, clean your brushes with soap and water if you want to treat them nicely and clean them correctly. And then that's it, you're done.